Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. On this episode of the podcast, I interview my friend Dylan Collins. Dylan is a professor of art for the School of Art and Design at West Virginia University. His artistic practice includes not only cast iron, but many materials and techniques. And if you don't know him already, I'm thrilled for you to get a chance to know him better through this interview. Dylan, thank you for making time in your schedule for this chat. Talking with you and learning about your life and your iron art practice was extremely entertaining, and your positive attitude is an important reminder for me to appreciate and learn from every experience I have. You have so many exciting irons in the fire at this moment, and I'm very eager to see how everything that you're working on turns out. The podcast Iron Show is sponsored in part by supporters on Patreon. So thank you to everyone who has joined as a Patreon member to help me afford the production costs of this show. I'm extremely proud to say that this episode is brought to you by our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. For more information about Sloss Metal Arts and their programs, visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com. So I bet you already know that Sloss Metal Arts hosts the National Conference on Contemporary Cast Iron Art and Practices. But if you don't, well, now you do. The steering committee for this national conference is in full swing with the planning of the event, and they have open calls for workshops, panels and presentations, demonstrations, guest furnaces, performances, and student cupola contest participants. The deadline for all of these are October 31st, so it's this coming Monday. If you have an idea that you want to share or promote at the conference, please do put your name in one of these hats. Community participation and sharing is what makes this event so special, but also it's one of the reasons why this event was created in the first place. So please apply for something. Whatever you have to say, we want to hear it or see it. And if you're a student, the Student Cupola Contest is for you. There's plenty of time for you to make a furnace, so get your friends together, because if you're really interested in learning how to produce your own iron, there's no better way than building and running your own furnace. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com, and I'll try and get you in touch with the right person or steering committee member. But this conference is for you. It's for us. So show us what you got. Well, now that you've been briefed on everything that's coming up, let's get on with the show. So for all of you listening or watching, thanks so much for tuning in, and please enjoy. Dylan Collins, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So before I actually start with the first question that I ask everybody, I have another question. Are you going to be at the Carbondale SIU Iron Pour on November 5th?
No,
Oh.
I am not, because I will be in Arizona. I'm actually a visiting artist at Arizona State for their Koji Iron Pour. So I am heading there to be their visiting artist. So, or else I would love to be in Carbondale.
Because you were there before the pandemic.
There's a couple, before the pandemic, like 2019, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was like, I'm going to ask him, because I knew I wouldn't be. I've been so excited to know if you were going to be there or not. But so we'll talk about.
I mean, I wish we were. Charlie would be coming with me if that was on the table. We would totally come in a heartbeat, but so it goes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you can't go to everything, and it's better to, share the love and go all the way out there. And
heck yeah.
All right. Well, then, now that that's out of my burning question, I've been wondering all day. So now that's out of the way. But I'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Anyway, we'll get to it. So, as is tradition, Dylan Collins. Well, who the hell are you, anyways?
Well, I am currently, my position, I'm associate professor and sculpture program coordinator in the School of Art and Design at West Virginia University. I also coordinate undergrad advising. That's kind of a new position. I'm taking on more of a leadership role with first year students. So I grew up in the Midwest, and I've been I'll talk more about that in my childhood. But I grew up in the Midwest. I've been in West Virginia since 2008, so it's hard to believe, like 14 years, and I love being in WVU in the School of Art and Design. So my artwork is focused on mixed media sculpture. I do iron casting, bronze and aluminum, kind of a self-taught blacksmith. So there's always some kind of wacky, elastic, kind of fun metal work that's involved. And I do rubber and plastic casting, so a lot of stuff with found objects. So I do a lot of different stuff, and that kind of funnels into my role as a teacher with teaching students about all those same kind of things in our studio art programs.
Well, I mean, I can't wait I feel like I wish, no, because I want to know about your childhood, but I kind of want to just like jump right to where you are now because I want to catch up with you. But I don't know anything about how you learned iron. Obviously, I don't know anything about your childhood, but let's start there. Do you have any memories from your childhood or adolescence, formative years of something that you could see circles around and maybe plays a large part in your life today?
I do. I mean, for me, growing up as a kid in the Midwest, I grew up in a really artistic family. So I have two younger brothers, and they're both super artistic. And then my mom was always a painter and an artist and a big gardener. My dad always joked that he was the art critic because he said, well, I'm not really artistic conventionally, but my parents were always really instilled a lot of values of hard work. And we took a lot of pleasure in it. And I would say probably the biggest thing, is thinking about kind of problem solving. That's a huge part of being a kid for me. We never had a lot of money, but we were really rich in kind of like the opportunities of growing up in a rural environment. One of my favorite stories is my brothers and I were always big builders. I mean, my dad's a painting contractor. And so he was always, had tools and liked to work with his hands. And we did that. We worked in the gardens. We built things. I remember one time my brothers and I, we were really proud because we had built a fort out in the woods and we were super excited. And then we took our parents out to see it and they said, this is great. You built it on somebody else's property, like out in the woods, which was pretty awesome. But that's just to me a great illustration of the kind of quality of being builders and thinkers and having a life full of imagination. So I feel really privileged to have grown up and had such, I kind of grew up too in a household where my parents were very kind of counterculture oriented, in the sense that they were part of the movement of folks in the 70s, like leaving Chicago and big cities and kind of getting back to the land. So growing up in that kind of environment with a lot of other similar like-minded people of kind of like post hippie 1970s and 80s. It was just amazing. So yeah, I have fond memories and I'm glad to see my brothers and I have kind of carried on and my parents as well. And, living our roots and our life in a really positive fashion.
Can you just give me like a quick storyline from how you got to childhood into maybe through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and, you can breeze over anything that's not important.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, thinking about some of the particulars, like I grew up in Charleston, Illinois, and the school there is Eastern Illinois University. So I went there to get my BA degree, Bachelor of Arts in 2D art. And I really started getting into welding. For me, it was one of those things like, I had always been kind of a pyromaniac, my brothers as well. We were always played with fire a lot. We were never destructive, but we just love fire. All of us were obsessed with it. So for me, getting to use like a welding torch, I was like, okay, this is where I've arrived. So, and I always like drawing and painting and printmaking. So I was always involved with that kind of stuff, but really sculpture started to take a bigger role. So I got my Bachelor of Arts degree in 1996, and then I stayed at Eastern Illinois for another year and got my Master of Arts degree focusing on sculpture. I was out of school for 3 years, lived in Champaign-Urbana, which is nearby. I was cooked at a great restaurant, worked in arts administration, kind of had a lot of really great experiences putting together like installation art shows with friends in the community. And I went back to school in 1999. So I started at Kent State University. So my reasons for going to Kent State couldn't have been more kind of not really well formed. I just like something. I like the fact that it was kind of Midwestern, but it was still a little bit of a distance, and it ended up being a real life-changing experience. Kent State was great. The faculty were incredible. Being close to the industrial culture in Cleveland and Akron, Ohio, like I really felt like I really had arrived when I got there in the sense of like thinking about that kind of industrial landscape and the materials I was exposed to. So that was really like kind of phenomenal. From that time, at Kent State, I really focused on blacksmithing. I did a little bit of metal casting, but blacksmithing and metal fab was my real jam. That was like the thing that got me really excited. I had an opportunity while I was there to work for an artist, John Communell, who's a really great friend and mentor. So he did outdoor sculpture and gates and railings. So I built like functional art. I built sculptures. We built grills, like, a giant bull that you would lift its back, lift a handle off the back, and it's a grill to grill ribs. Like, we did all kinds of just crazy, awesome projects. And it really gave me a sense of like what was possible with metal. So that was kind of my formative time. I was at Kent for several years. I think I taught there. I graduated in 2003. I taught there until 2007. I also taught at Oberlin College. So I had that experience of like adjunct work, mostly in drawing, but some sculpture. And then I got my first teaching job at Southeast Missouri State University in 2007 to 2008. So I'm working at SEMO in Cape Girardeau, which was great. But it was in foundations. It was in kind of like introductory art. And I really felt like my heart was in sculpture. So I got hired at West Virginia West Virginia University in 2008. And it was a visiting position, and then it was an instructor position. Eventually, I made the case for being an indispensable part of the program. So I got put on tenure track, and I got tenure in 2020. So I feel incredibly privileged to have a teaching job, doing what I love. I work with really amazing people who are very kind and thoughtful. And we have a dynamic, program. It's kind of the thrill of my life, to be honest.
That's so good to hear, because I don't always hear that type of, positive stories from that line of work. And so that's such a gift.
Yeah, it really is a gift. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So I feel like before you got to where you're at today as a tenure track professor, you were introduced to iron. So where did that fit in?
Well, believe it or not, I was a very late comer to the iron game. So a couple of things I would say. So when I got the job at WVU, the current job I have now, so that I actually really had to kind of cut my teeth on foundry. I hadn't done as much foundry work, and that was a big part of the job. I knew enough to kind of know my way around.
Okay.
And I had a lot of help as well. So getting here, that was kind of something that got me started on the path to iron, was having the job here. And we have like kind of very, I feel like we're really privileged in the sense that we have bronze and aluminum in-house, like an indoor foundry. So we did a lot of bronze and aluminum. We did traditional investment. So I really did that for many years. I really kind of got their program very reinvigorated with metal casting, because it was something I was super excited about.
Yeah.
And my introduction to iron, believe it or not, was my friend Jeremy Entwistle. So Jeremy's a really good buddy of mine. He was an alum from our program before my time. And he had moved away, and he and his family came back to West Virginia in the early 2000s, like maybe 2010 to 12, something like that. So he came back to West Virginia, and he ended up getting hired at a nearby university, Fairmont State University. So they're about a half an hour away from us. So Jeremy was really excited about iron casting, and he kind of said, well, we got to do this together. This is a great thing for us to bring our programs together. So it had that kind of sense of collegiality, where I think a lot of times too, where our programs were not that far away distance wise, but we had no interaction. So it was really a way for us to kind of like combine forces. It was really good for the students to get the chance to work together. We had some things to share amongst ourselves, that kind of pooling resources, saving money, being thoughtful about that stuff. So that was really great. So he kind of got me excited. And he had built cupolas. He actually had a cupola that was, in the yard at our kiln yard at our school for many years. And he kind of retrieved it and recouped it and got it running again. And then that was kind of my first iron casting experience, was at Fairmont State, where he's located, being out in a giant kind of, next to some municipal like tennis courts, and next to kind of like, kind of on the end of campus where you can make fire and explosions and mayhem, and not make too much of a mess or make anybody too kind of anxious, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
Or
which is very
uncomfortable.
typical often in college environments, but it was awesome. I mean, the first experience of casting iron, it just felt to me, it was something so, I think many artists experience this. It felt very primordial, like I think about those things about how the things about how all of these atoms that were part of something bigger that we all exploded and we came back together. There's like people have talked about it in a much more poetic fashion than I am right now, but thinking about these really elemental things. So thinking about, kind of like magma that made continents and all these kind of like forces of nature that exist under our feet that we can't even see. That was really heavy to me to be in the midst of this iron thing. And I had experienced that with like my own experience as a foundry work. I experienced it in blacksmithing because there's something physical and elemental. And I would say for me, my art, I want it to have a physicality. Now, sometimes that physicality can be sitting there at a table with a beer or gluing objects to something. It doesn't have to always be like poetic or heroic. But I do like that sense of the physicality. I think the best art, that the things I would identify myself with the most, they have a physical quality. Like if you can tell it's been twisted or bent or shaped, or it makes it look easy, but it was really a ton of work on the back end to wrestle it in some fashion. So casting iron with Jeremy and his students, it became kind of something that was really a hallmark of our friendship, something I'm really eternally grateful for. So we continued to do this at his school at Fairmont State, and then we would do some iron pours at West Virginia University. So we would kind of like trade off in like having these different events. And then that became my entree into meeting other people from the cast iron community, which has really been just, as the saying goes, if it's the gift that keeps on giving. So particularly like meeting people that Jeremy knew from the cast iron community in Pittsburgh. So some of the folks from like Rivers of Steel Arts who cast iron now at Cary Furnaces, National Historic Landmark. Our friend Christian Benefel, who was formerly faculty member at Shepherd University in Shepherdstown in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. So, all of these people who had a ton of knowledge and experience, and were really gracious in trying to invite me and my students to be part of this. It's like stuff that changed my life as far as like getting to be part of the community, making friends, making connections, and that stuff still resonates. It's going to continue to resonate as long as I'm on God's green earth. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I was completely wrong. I assumed that you'd been, see, that's the thing. I fall into this trap sometimes in that in my thinking, when I meet somebody and they're really well established in the community, like you are, and you got a lot of good stuff going on, but then also on the pour floor, I've seen you grab a ladle from I don't know if you remember, but there was a first timer at that Carbondale pour, which was the first time that I'd ever poured like leathered up beside you. And that first time student that was there was pouring, and the mold had an inclusion in it that caused it to like explode it like unexpectedly. So I have footage of that because like I was filming it with my camera, and the student was pouring it and the explosion happened, and the next thing I know, like you're just holding the ladle. Like there's like that. And so to be somewhere and experience that amount of confidence in you, I'm like, obviously you've been pouring iron forever. Do you know what I mean? And
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. And I think some of it, it's like, I mean, I'll admit too, that it's like, there's times where I feel like I've had other people who really saved my biscuits, who really stepped in, and that's, we'll get to that as we talk about, some of our favorite things, because that's like kind of high on my list. But certainly I feel like a lot of it is, being part of a community and part of a team. It's like my wife and I always say teamwork makes the dream work. And it is really true in the best endeavors, but certainly in iron casting, no doubt. It is the kind of a principle that we all live by, for sure.
And I also have to say that stories like yours, where I find out somebody that I think you've been pouring iron for forever since undergrad or something like that. Cause it's like all I can do is, you know, guess, make up,
Yeah,
it's like the story I was making up
sure.
in my head. Like, obviously you learned iron in and then you're like, actually, no, I was already faculty somewhere and I learned from
Yeah.
another like that's good for me to learn. It's good for me, and I think people like me to hear this type of a story because
Hmm.
I feel like it gives me hope that I can still embark in something new or like learn something. Like this old dog can learn new tricks. Not that you were old when you learned iron casting, but it's like, sometimes when you meet somebody that's been pouring forever, it's like I get a little jealous. Anyways, enough about
I know what
me.
you mean. It's
But
it's
it's
kind of
just,
like I try to remind my students, what's that saying? Don't be afraid to suck at something new. It's
yeah.
like it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. It's like, yeah, just put yourself out there. It's such a wonderful part of it. It's vulnerable and it's challenging, but it's also ultimately pretty rewarding.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, I kind of want to know about how that first conversation when your friend Jeremy brought this, like, how did he bring it up to you? Was he like, hey, I've been doing this? Like, had you heard of iron casting before? And so then, and you saw the furnace in the yard, so you kind of
Yeah,
knew.
yeah. So as I remember it, I mean, I had it on my radar. I
Hmm.
just had never done it. I had friends who were part of iron casting, like at different institutions, even when I lived in Illinois, and it just was never something really that I just wasn't as excited about metal casting.
Hmm.
I guess the foundry thing just wasn't quite as appealing to me. But I do feel like, I think from our conversations, it was something that we really liked the idea of kind of sharing resources. It
Yeah.
was kind of like after the recession in 2008. So thinking about how can we, share things amongst our programs? How can we be really pragmatic? How can we bring our students together? So it was great. I mean, we did other things too. We went to like Salem Artworks. They have
Yeah.
their big iron pours and falls. So things and that was pretty incredible. Sort of thinking about ways that we got to say, like, bring together our students and carpool and travel, but then even see like alumni. I had an alumni, Ben Gazy, who was part of the program at Alfred University. So he was doing like an installation there. So that was really thrilling I guess I started to see it less about like one thing. I mean, I think sometimes academia can make you feel very driven in one way, like, well, I'm going to teach my classes or I have to get to this show or do this thing. But I think for me, what I found infinitely appealing from, my conversations with Jeremy as a good friend, it was also something where I started to see things as kind of like a little more holistic. So it's not just like one thing in kind of a bubble. It's like, how do these multiple things start to converge? And even in like friendships and relationships, that's something I really, when I talk a little bit more about some of the current things I'm doing, that was something that really struck me from some of the current engagements I've had with iron, is just like what a small but supportive community it is. And even thinking about how we nurture the future with iron
Mm.
casting, with thinking about how do we bring young people into the programs, and the campaigns and the interest. I think it's really fertile and exciting, and I feel pretty buoyed by experiences in the last couple of months. So yeah, and I feel like it was just something that I was all in, and I also too. It's something that he and I, as teachers, really, we made a pact. Like, okay, we're not just doing this for our students, but we need to do it for our own art. Like we bring things to the table, so it's not just that we're doing a service for these young people who we care about, who are our students, but we're doing it also for ourselves to get art product that then we can do something else with for other purposes. Which that was awesome. I mean, that was like words of wisdom. Don't be a martyr. Like, make sure it's actually something where you're getting it for you as well as your students. You're helping each other towards this solid endeavor.
And it's a better way to connect with your students too, because I feel like
Yes.
I've had, a couple professors in my day throughout undergrad and grad, but yeah, the students, I'm sorry, I meant to say the professors that I really witnessed them making their work and watching them go through that process themselves. it's a different type of a role model, when you
Yeah.
see them juggling, teaching me, and then also making their work and showing in shows. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, showing the path that they're on. And it helps me
Yeah.
be more
Agreed.
educated about how I want to move forward with my life.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, at this point now, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you want
Yeah.
to just like talk about like how iron casting has grown in your area, or if you just want to you know, start with like whatever. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
So some recent things that I've been involved with really reminded me, kind of in a way, to in a post-pandemic world, just how resonant the iron community is and how
Yeah.
fabulous it is. I just got to participate just 2 weekends ago. I was at the Festival of Combustion, which is a big fire arts festival, and that's hosted by Rivers of Steel and Rivers of Steel Arts. So it's Carey Furnace's National Historic Landmark. It's kind of the Sloss furnaces of the north. So it's a big industrial landmark, and it's really the city of Pittsburgh has put a ton of energy into kind of promoting the growth of it with making better roads that connect it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're having kind of an awesome moment. And one of the things, they hadn't had it for a couple of years. The pandemic really kind of put a squashed it for the
Yeah.
last couple of years, which is a real bummer. But they had like 3,000 people at this event. So it was iron casting and all the other fire arts. So they had people do blacksmithing and glass blowing. I was so busy casting iron. I didn't get to go to the whiskey tent or eat the really good tacos or anything, but it was incredible. The thing I was really heartened by and reminded of is what a community is from young to old. There's kind of a real range of folks who are participating.
Mm-hmm.
There's also really a focus too, I find, for myself, as I get further, and some of it is the role as a teacher, but also thinking about how to be helpful
Mm-hmm.
in the process. So I spent an awful lot of time, spotting people, making sure
Mm-hmm.
people were safe. I had two students who had never attended, so that was great to see them get really fired up and excited to make their first works in cast iron. So it was awesome, and seeing the community too. I got to see friends like my friend Coral Lambert, who she showed a sculpture at WVU a couple years ago for our first annual sculpture tour. So she had
Mm-hmm.
artwork on campus, and then getting to meet her or see her again and meet her students. And I had just gotten to see her in Berlin with all the other folks who were there, her among many others who were just in Berlin at the ninth International Conference on Contemporary Cast Iron Art, which was really a blast. So it was just an amazing thing. And I think also too, being reminded that it's really a community of a lot of young people who are like, I've never met before. And some of them are like my students who are out in the world doing other things, getting excited about their careers and being kind of the next generation. And then there's, older folks who are, kind of some of the founders of the kind of cast iron community who are still so active and vibrant, making art and connecting with people, providing helpful advice, being like, really vibrant kind of participants. So it's kind of that range that to me is particularly exciting, that it's like kind of recruiting for the future, getting people excited, and then, everybody kind of trying to work together to think about where this crazy community goes next.
Oh yeah, and I feel that even just doing these interviews, because I want to interview everybody. I want to interview, the founding, what we would think of as like kind of like the founders of the cast iron art in America movement, and then obviously it's spread internationally spread, but also I want to interview some students, some people that have I have, interviewed, Gabby, who was the last episode's guest, is one of Coral's students right now. And so, I mean, she's been in the community for a while, but just capturing these stories as people are going through their lives and at different, maybe, as I move forward, I might be trying to capture different people as they go through different phases in their lives and in their careers as we move forward. But
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the things that's like great about this community is there's so many different stories and different perspectives, but we all kind of
Yeah.
have, like, I don't want to say we have one goal, but we have goals that are in alignment, or like the Venn diagrams
Yeah.
of our goals have like a lot in common. And so that's just incredible. So you had like a full fall of
Oh
the
yeah. It's
international.
one of
Mhm.
my colleagues at the university. We were a bunch of us. We have like a cocktail hour. So he showed up and he's like, I feel like I've been shot out of a cannon. And I was like, I can relate.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just been and I'm taking on kind of more administrative roles, which I love. I mean, I always joke to myself, if I was 18 starting college, I would be excited to meet the future version of me,
Hmm.
which maybe that sounds conceited, but I don't know. I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job, and I feel like I can be a voice for our students. So those kind of administrative roles, and just thinking about all the things that are part of my job, which it's very full.
Hmm.
And it was a really busy summer. We actually luckily have record enrollment, post pandemic. So there's a lot of things that I feel like some of it may be also just things getting back to more of a sense of normal after a couple, I mean, dormant kind of years. I mean, they don't
Yeah.
feel entirely dormant because they were still busy, but it's definitely back in full force. But yeah, this fall has been incredible. I mean, when I was in Berlin, so I did a presentation myself on creative arts, or fire arts and creative placemaking, or
Uh-huh.
fire arts and placemaking. So that was thinking about issues of place and space along with the fire arts, and that was really inspiring. And it kind of got into political events, current events, like thinking about how you draw together art and kind of cultural history and sociology and time and space. So that was fabulous. I got to serve on a panel about VR sculpture with
Uh-huh.
Mary Neubauer and Hannah McConan. So that was really fabulous. That was a great panel of some fabulous artists. So that was really cool. Yeah, and I was in some really great shows. So that was just incredible to be part of everything at the Ninth International. And then while I was over there, I decided to kind of make an industrial heritage research trip out of it. So I went to my wife, Jo Nelson, who's my artistic collaborator as well on
Yeah.
some projects.
Hmm.
So she and I were there, and we decided to go to Luxembourg after we left Berlin.
Hmm.
So her family, she has a sister who lives in Luxembourg. And then also, one of the goals was to see family, but also to have it be a research trip fundamentally that was about getting to see the steel mines in Luxembourg. So we got to go down in some steel mines, which was absolutely just stunning. I mean, it was just getting, and that's kind of some of my research now, is thinking about industrial culture and how we preserve these sites and heritage. So it's kind of like, it was a real heady brew of like amazing research and time with family and like time on the road. I was thrilled to be back, but it really is. It's kept me pretty revved up here this last month, I guess, since I've been back. It's hard to believe, but yeah, it's kept me busy, to say the least.
Well, so tell me a little bit about over at the international, like, because
Yeah.
obviously I couldn't make it this year, and I hope that the next time it rolls around, I'll be able to swing it for sure, wherever it happens to be. Um, but and I talked about it a little bit with Gabby, because Gabby was in Coral's performance, and so she gave me a kind of like, a little bit of a rundown of what her personal experience was being in the performance. But
Yeah.
what are was there a production pour? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I because of my teaching schedule, I unfortunately missed. I only saw the performance side of things, more from a distance, like on social media. I mean,
Okay.
it was stunning. It was visually stunning. I mean, the kind of industrial site where it was located was just, out of control. It was just like a big, beautiful, like something really so cinematic and epic in scope.
Yeah.
And the pores, it's like, it's interesting. I will confess that I was not part of any iron casting at the Ninth International,
Well, that's
which
okay.
is not a criticism.
Yeah.
And that was just, some of it was me just trying to get ready for my own presentation, my own things I was doing. I know that they were some of it was like technical difficulties, like challenges, pulling things together. So yeah, in that sense, that's my only lament, is that some of it was just my crazy teaching schedule and trying to prepare for my own
Oh yeah.
things.
Well, that's situational. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know that, like as an example, my friend Jeremy Entwistle with some other collaborators. So it was really great to see, like they were working on. Jeremy's been working with some really great collaborators on cokeless iron casting.
Uh-huh.
So they did some really fabulous presentations at the conference, which was wild. I know they were kind of working on some of that kind of stuff, like thinking about how they got that kind of I believe they were working on that as some of their research at the conference, and they had a really great presentation. So that was, I mean, if I had any reflections on the conference, that would be one, is thinking about the future of cast iron. So thinking about, some of the things related to, kind of thinking about ecology and climate change, and like being
Yeah.
really thoughtful about it. Like that was something to me that was super exciting, because it is kind of the future. I mean, it doesn't mean that some of these old ways are going to necessarily go away, but just thinking about like other ways of looking at it. And there have been many artists thinking about things like, working with, say, like land gas, methane, expelled from a landfill, and using that as a gas resource to run your furnace. I mean, those kind of things. There's a lot of some of those things with ecology really impress me, because I think it's like kind of how art, like cast iron, intersects, the Venn diagram you talked about, like
Yeah.
intersecting with larger concerns in the greater world as well as the greater art world.
Yeah.
I was impressed too. One of my former students presented at a panel on, inclusion and equity, which was just fabulous, because I do think that that's a big deal, of thinking about, the realities of like, how do we make an inclusive community? How is it kind of like, really allowing everybody to feel like they have a place? And added to that, I would say one of the best panels I saw was all about accommodations. So how do we think about different like learning styles, as well as like people of different abilities being part of the cast iron community. So thinking about, whether it's like different kind of physical capabilities, or thinking about, different learning styles. So that was super fascinating. I mean, it was just, I feel like the panels, to me, it gave me so much, like such a crash course in just inspiration. It's stunning. I mean, it's really, and I think at like all the best conferences, particularly people you really like and care about and want to get to know better, it's like, kind of like a whole new community of people that I never knew, or I knew of them and didn't know them face to face. And I feel like that's probably one of my favorite things about casting iron, is every experience I come back from it buoyed by the kind of activity and the camaraderie, which is good, when you're nursing your sore muscles, to think about that was really cool, that thing that we did. But I think also too, just thinking about all these other new friends and kind of connections, and camaraderie, and it's really something. I have a big interest in community-based art and public art, so that kind of dovetails really nicely with just that sense of community that I felt like in some of these experiences the last couple of months.
Yeah. And it sounds like those panels and presentations that you're talking about, those are topics that I feel like are going to become more and more prevalent in our community. And I think it's good that they were kind of like present at the international. And I'm excited to see some of those themes start to come to maybe the conference at Sloss or something.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
agreed. Yeah,
Um,
it's like a peek into the future for
yeah,
sure.
because I think that when this interview comes out, the open calls, so we're going to do a shameless plug for the open calls for the national conference hosted by Sloss Metal Arts in Birmingham, Alabama. They are accepting applications for proposals for everything, but panels, presentations, guest furnaces to help with production, performance pours, just everything. So if you're listening, this is like a commercial break from the interview, I guess, or whatever, but just go over to the NCCC IAP website. I think it's just that nccciap.com. Or if you Google it, but yeah, if you're listening to this and it's before October 31st, the applications are still open. Anyways, okay. So, and there was something else I was going to ask you about. Oh, so can you walk me through the experience of seeing um, the steel, oh, I lost my word.
The mining.
The mine. Yeah, the steel
Yeah.
mines. Like, are they still, is it dumb of me to ask? Like, are they still in, they're not still in.
No, it's not dumb
Okay.
at all. It's I actually had no idea. I mean, so Luxembourg is a very tiny country. I mean, it's like maybe 30 kilometers, I believe, in its kind of breadth. And it's really incredible because it like the things I didn't know. So things about Luxembourg, I mean, the short version is, now it's kind of the center of international banking, and it's such a immigrant community. I mean, the person who works at like the Costco store speaks like 6 languages, and that's, it's incredible. It's such an international place. It's really stunning, and people are friendly. Great social services, free transportation all over the country. It's amazing. But the thing I didn't realize is that Luxembourg, it had a very long history because it's in such a great location. It had been kind of conquered and, by many different people. It had kind of a real strategic location. And in the kind of like 18 and, kind of 1900s, basically my kind of understanding is like the 1860s or so until like 1960s, so like 100-year span, that iron mining and steel production was that is the thing that drove their economy. So it was really stunning. So going down in this mine, so the mine, my understanding from our friend, my wife had some friends who took us on this great tour. Shout out to Stefan and Jocelyn for being great tour guides. So we went to this mine and they had redone it. So they had like a visitor center with a lot of the artifacts, which is really great. And then, and that's just kind of the thing to whet your appetite. And I will say that I thought a lot about, where I live, West Virginia, they have such a big tradition of like coal mining, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about like this kind of like, for me, thinking from Appalachia to this other mountainous region where people are mining, you're doing extractive industry. So that was really profound to think about this kind of connection from Appalachia to Europe. Yeah. So going down in the mines, they have a tour. So it is like a several-hour tour, and you take a little train and you go down in the mine and you get your hard hat, and they actually do a really pretty incredible job. I mean, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff of like historical timelines, but basically they walked us through the history of mining in their country. So they walked us through the entire history from like, using like more like pack animals and carts to using like more, mechanized ways of removing iron. So, and there's a long history too in that area of people like the Celts, people walking through the fields and gathering iron for smelting, and then, people mining it from the ground. And it's just fascinating. I mean, also, any of those extractive industries are about labor history. They're about kind of, culture. They're about people's belief systems, whether it's religious or their kind of family units. So there's a lot kind of like wrapped up in that. So it was absolutely stunning. I mean, it was like a life-changing experience to be down in there and to see this kind of, and really to see this former seat of industry. And now it's a museum. And also my understanding from other local friends we talked to, people my wife knows who work in like organic farming, they also talked about how it's really changed because it's become more formalized. Like say if it was like when they were kids, they would go to the mines and it was the old timers who used to work at the mines giving the tours. Yeah. And the person who gave our tour gave it in 2 different languages. Oh, wow. So, they're speaking, to different groups of people. So it was amazing. I mean, it was really, I feel like for me, with some of my interests in industrial culture and community-based art, just some of the stuff I'm interested in, it's like really gotten me excited about what the future is. I don't know exactly where all those research avenues will end up, but stay tuned. I mean, I think it's going to be something big and exciting. And it's really gotten me just thinking, which I think is the point of any good research, not to feel like you have to have a slam dunk, like a plan, but just to get yourself percolating. So yeah, being down in the iron mine and having that tied into the time I spent in Berlin at the Ninth International. I mean, it's just, and then being at Carrie Furnace,
Yeah, so
just,
let's jump over to
yeah,
that experience.
yeah.
And so cuz it sounds like have they like from what you were talking about before, they kind of have done maybe a similar thing that you saw in Luxembourg and like taking this old industrial site and making it like, do they have tours? Because I've never been there, but I've seen a lot on the Instagram.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. I mean, Carrie Furnace to me, it's very comparable to Sloss. I feel like I've been friends with the folks there. Paige Henry, Ed Parrish Jr., Cricket Baines, among many others. But those are some of the folks, who are really kind of instrumental on like an iron casting end. And the Rivers of Steel Arts. I mean, they've just really they've had really. I've seen them really grow as a kind of a unit, an organization in the time since I started going there. They've become, they're doing a lot of stuff with community outreach. So doing a lot of things like similar to Sloss, like art activities for Make a Doodle Bowl or, taking like portable metal casting things to kind of the surrounding boroughs and communities. And I think too, like this iron pour, this last time for the Festival of Combustion, a couple weekends ago, it was so professional, it was so inclusive, it was so safe. I mean, it was just like it hit all the right notes, and they outdid themselves because they did like a iron pour for people in a workshop, and then I couldn't believe it. They actually had like everybody, all the people who paid to get into this conference. Now, mind you, this is like 3,000 people from Pittsburgh coming in with their kids. Once they got in, the art activities were free.
Oh,
so once they paid their tickets, so they had like 300 scratch blocks. I mean, we had like more scratch blocks than I've ever seen in my life. So we cast a whole mountain and people picked them up, so it was kind of cool that there was a lot of other, paid things with food and drink, and they obviously paid to get in, but then they had other activities for kids. So, and they had, like, I saw some of my alumni, like my friend Luke Doyle, a potter who works in Pittsburgh and was really proud to see how well he's doing. And they're like doing raku pottery, and they have all these other art activities. So it was pretty insane and epic. I mean, it was just great. And that's the thing too, is that they're doing like hard hat tours of the site. They have a lot of things too about kind of reclamation. So talking about, how do we have plants that remediate the soil? How do we think about, kind of stewardship and safety? And I think also too, frankly, I think, if you think about a place like Sloss or Carrie Furnaces, these national historic landmarks, I mean, frankly, they are too big to tear down. So they are epic and beautiful, but people in other eras might have said, oh, we should tear this down. But then it's just so much infrastructure, right?
yeah.
And I think also too, the real thing I see is people have changed. And it has happened actually in a short period of time, like in the last 20 years, of like myself teaching and making sculpture and being part of these communities. I really feel like also too, there's such a hunger that people have to engage with this industrial history. I mean, I think frankly, similar to Luxembourg, I think at some point people might have said, God, I feel kind of embarrassed by this stuff, like we did this thing and it kind of failed. And we have this hulking kind of steel mass, and what do we do with it? I think also now it's had that thing. It's kind of like a prize fighter in their prime. It's stayed around long enough, and people have gotten excited, and then they've made it, really safe and accessible, and talking about the history and culture. And now people just are eating it up, which I think is great, because really, if you think about a place like Pittsburgh or Birmingham or Luxembourg, they have these amazing industrial histories, and it's like to celebrate it, to embrace it, to think about what we can learn from it. How do we learn about industrial history, labor history, think about the future with climate change. There's a lot of kind of stuff like it's like peeling an onion, to use a kind of kind of a phrase. It's very much about these layers of the onion we're peeling to get to this thing that's really exciting. So people were jazzed about it. It was incredible. They outdid themselves because they had a production pour, and then they had a performance pour and fireworks at the end of the night. So I was like, wait, there's fireworks? So it was just incredible. I mean, it was stunning. And the people were so great. And I was reminded too, like at the end of the pour, Ed Parrish Jr. came up to us and said, you guys really helped us because we had a lot of scratch blocks to pour.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like my colleague Charlie Scott, and my grad students, Abby Rupert and Asha Kakaba, they were hustling the whole time, like, and me, us, as well as a lot of others, and Coral and her students, Patty Beachley, all of us are working together, right, to like, with our students, to like turn over these iron, cast iron blocks, these scratch blocks. So really, we all saved each other's butts yet again. And that's something to me that's like a perennial thing that I think about, how many times that I was like, gosh, I'm so glad this person showed up, because I don't know what I would have done without their help. And also, frankly, I don't know what I believe spiritually, but I do believe we all have guardian angels looking out for us, and I think that that can be something that's beyond a religious tradition of any particular kind. I'm not anti-religious. I just don't know what I believe, but I do believe we have guardian angels looking out for us, and my feeling has always been, you have these people helping you out, and, being part of a community, and also stepping up and giving of themselves unselfishly. Honestly, what could be better than that, to have people care about you in that way? It's kind of a lesson, I think, that we can all take forward. So yeah, it was awesome. I mean, I'm just so buoyed by the experience, and grateful for the friendship and camaraderie. And I feel like I spent like a week just being like sleepless and exhausted, but now I'm back at it and feeling good. And it takes you a while to kind of come down. My grad students, they were like, yeah, anything I do this week seems boring, because that was so great. I was like, I can relate.
Yeah. I mean, I think
So,
that there is something about coming back from poor, or from mostly, like, I think going to a conference or a trip, maybe
oh
more
yeah,
so than having a at home, like a home turf pour, but coming back from the Western. Yeah. And just
I bet.
telling some story, just, I have a group of friends, and just, how was your conference? And I'm like, well, there was a carnival and people dressed up like clowns, and we rode in bathtubs, and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, and that wasn't even the poor. That was just the
Yeah,
carnival.
right.
It's
Yeah,
like these stories, you can't even make this up, because it's
yeah,
just
right.
so bonkers. And that's
Yeah,
something that, yeah, I think it's sometimes hard to come, like, not feel sad when it's over. And
yeah.
but then we have something, so I got to get out there next year. So is it a
Yeah, it's
yearly?
great. I mean, I think their plan is to do it every year. I mean,
Okay.
now post pandemic, I mean, it's usually in autumn. So yeah, that would be my advice to anybody who has the opportunity, is to go to Pittsburgh and check out Rivers of Steel Arts, and check out what they do at Carey Furness's National Historic Landmark, because it's pretty stunning. I mean, and I think the Festival of Combustion, it's just something that it's such a great community. It's always well attended. And it's really, it just was a blast. Literally, it was just such a blast to be part of it. So it's great. It's something that I really have looked forward to before the pandemic, and now that we're, fingers crossed, hopefully through that portion, being back to somewhat of a sense of normal, it's something that
Yeah.
I'm looking to look forward to every year.
So then let's go on to, like, what else? Because you were talking about, you feel like you've been shot out of a cannon. So you come back from Festival of Combustion, but, I feel like I saw on your Instagram something about setting up an exhibition.
Oh yeah, so I'm part of a faculty exhibit. So we actually have, believe it or not, we have never had a faculty exhibit. We've had one since I've been here in my 14 years. So we're trying to, I know it seems a little weird, because usually everybody has a faculty show, but yes, we have a faculty show called Post Pan, with works from my insanely talented colleagues here in the WVU School of Art and Design. So that is already open, and we're going to do a gallery talk this week. So that's super exciting. I'm knee deep in academic advising, which is awesome. Not very exciting, but I feel really privileged to get to work with the awesome young people. We have record enrollment, so I have a lot of kids to meet with. So that's taken up a lot of my time. What other things I guess I have going on? I'm getting ready to head to a conference in a couple weeks. My wife Jo Nelson and I are presenting about some cool public art projects that we've done collaboratively. So yeah, we're going to be talking part of a panel discussion about art and community engagement. So it's a CCAC. It's a formerly the Southeast College Art Conference. So that's in Baltimore. So that's up in a couple of weeks. And thinking about kind of partnerships and relationships. So my friend Mary Neubauer, I was on a panel. She chaired a panel, Speculative Object, that was all about virtual reality and the future of sculpture, which was utterly fascinating. I feel like such a great education I got from being part of her panel with her and Hannah McConan. And then Mary, as part of our conversation, she invited me to be her guest artist for their upcoming Koji iron pour at Arizona State University. So that's going to happen in beginning of November. So I am super excited about that. I have some weirdly awesome art experimental, I'm trying to challenge myself with cast iron and try some weird new things. So I'm kind of excited about what I'm going to be doing. And also it's my challenge because I'm whetting your appetite. I don't know if it's going to be exciting if I tell you what it really is going to be, but I'm also, it's that challenge of like, how do you take something with you on a plane that you're going to cast in iron? So
I was gonna, okay, well, I don't want to,
oh no, I can spoil it. I can,
well,
I'd be happy to tell you what the idea is if you want.
I do want to know, but
okay.
I was going to ask you, like, are you driving? Or are you flying? Are you going to ship?
I'm flying.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna fly. So which is, and that's the other thing too, is that it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. And she's a great friend, and I'm just excited to, it's been many years since I've been to Arizona, and she has just a killer program.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I decided the thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make cast iron Billy Bob teeth, like the kind of hillbilly teeth.
Oh,
I've been really interested a lot in Appalachia.
yeah.
So thinking about kind of stereotypes of Appalachia. I've been doing some other work with 3D printed text and school desks. I had a lot of work where I'm interested in school desks as a metaphor for kind of like the space where learning and indoctrination meets like dreams and flights of fancy. I guess I spent a lot of time spacing out as a student. Imagine that,
but that's okay.
But yeah, but my thing I'm actually doing at this Koji iron pour, my plan is to cast Billy Bob teeth.
Okay.
And my reasoning for that is I want something that I can actually attach a magnet to and stick it to a building and then photograph the building so the building becomes anthropomorphic. So it's going to be something like a cast iron project that's a little more photo based. So thinking about, like, I like the idea of something. I really love the idea too of something. It's kind of something, honestly, my students taught me. I make them do a lot of projects where they have to build something and then photograph it in context and then think about how the photograph becomes the art, which I think part of our, kind of saturated social media environment. I mean, there's certainly, sometimes it could be annoying, but I think it's also kind of amazing that we tend to consume those images of things as much as we see the actual art. We think about the image of it. And I also like the idea too of myself being somebody who's kind of a resident of Appalachia, then taking it to other places and kind of photographing it. So it's almost kind of like, country boy in the city. So there's some kind of like poking fun at myself too. So that's, and also, like I said, it's something that I can take on a plane. I'm probably going to get some weird looks when they're like, what are you doing with 20 like cast iron Billy Bob teeth? But
on the way back,
that's kind of my plan.
So are you going to make the molds there?
I am. Yeah. So that's something, because that was another part of it too. Kind of like I mentioned, with Jeremy Entwistle, with casting iron with him as a friend and comrade. He's like, we need to do this for our students, but we got to do it for ourselves. So, I kind of took that to heart. And Mary said, well, make sure, you're going to make some molds. And I'm like, well, how much iron can I take in my suitcase, before it gets away? So trying to think small. And actually, I kind of like I think there's such a long history and tradition of like small metal casting. I mean, honestly, a lot of times, if you look across the long arc of history, those small things like votive sculptures and combs for people's hair, those are the things that lasted a lot longer if they were bronze, because they didn't get melted down to be turned into cannons. So
Mm.
so yeah, so it's really awesome. So stay tuned, but I'm pretty psyched. That's going to be, kind of doing. It's also ironic because I'm in the midst of all these other projects that I have to get done.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, I'll start a new project. It's like a new whirlwind romance with iron. But I'm psyched. I mean, it's going to be, and then I'll get back, and it'll be like almost time for Thanksgiving and
Yeah.
end of the semester, and it's just yeah, it's there's just always a lot to do.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly thrilling. I feel really lucky to be where I am and doing what I'm doing for sure.
Yeah. Are you aware if you're going to be doing them in shell or are you going to be doing them in sand?
Probably in sand, I'm
Okay.
guessing. I'm just kind
Okay.
of I'm kind of guessing that's my general sense, but yeah, it's going to be cool. I think you always learn a lot when you see other people's methods of like
Yeah.
how they do, any of the foundry stuff. And I'll be doing that with Mary Neubauer and her students. I'll be
Yeah.
demoing or I
Uh-huh.
guess I really won't be demoing. I'll be working with them to make molds, but
Uh-huh.
also I'll be doing at least a
Yeah.
public lecture with students. So yeah, it's going to be great. I mean, it's always fun to see how other people do things and what they're engaged with. It's super exciting.
So, um, with these in mind, if it is going to be sand, it's going to have to be multiple parts, you think? Yeah.
Yeah, probably at least two parts, I would
Well, at
imagine.
least
Yeah,
two, but I'm trying to
yeah,
think of the complexity of, and like, where would you gate into? Like maybe in the
yeah. I don't know.
back?
It's a probably the back. Yeah, I'm kind of
Yeah.
guessing,
Would
and
you
that's the
put,
other thing too. Is I feel like it's kind of a great form because it's such a it's kind of like an industrial knockoff. So
yeah.
if anything, make having it come out a little rougher is kind of an advantage.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I want them to be. They're going to be weird and they're going to be fun, and I think it's the start of something really
Oh,
cool.
yeah. I mean, and also when you were talking about taking it places and having a magnet attachment and then photographing that. And I'm going to say this, I hope you're not insulted, but it reminds me a little bit of the whole gnome thing, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
where they
absolutely.
take
Yeah,
the gnome and then they
absolutely.
take photos of the gnome in different, I can't remember where, I feel like that was from a movie or something. And
Yeah, it was that Amelie? I can't
Amelie,
remember.
yeah.
No, I know what you mean though. Yeah, no, I actually that is a spot on comparison. And like I said, for me, it's just something that I love the idea of kind of like. I also kind of thought about it's almost like a disguise, like a bit of an imposter.
Yeah.
So for me, it's also kind of like my goal is like take it on other travels and photograph it in weird places.
In different
And
places
yeah, and I
around the
think that,
world.
like I said, it's like I get kind of envious of photographers sometimes when I'm like, oh man, to be able just to like take a photo and have that be part of your practice. And I was like, wait, I should learn from that rather than just being envious. I should see what they can teach me as a maker. So yeah, stay
Exactly.
tuned. It's going to be great. I mean, I'm pumped, and I just think it's going to be very cool.
Yeah. One more weird specific question. Will you put more than one? Because you're bringing a couple, like you're bringing, are they all different styles or are they the same style?
No, they're all kind of the same. There's slight variations, but
Okay.
like, yeah, they're all pretty similar.
Will you put more than one in a mold?
I think so. I mean, my goal is honestly, I don't need a ton of them. That's the other thing too. It's like if I left with like half a dozen, I would be probably happy as a
Yeah.
clam.
You're
But yeah,
probably
we'll
like,
see. I mean, it's kind of to me, it's like about perfect. I mean, because I kept, I cast some pretty big things at recently at Rivers of Steel, and they didn't
yeah.
totally come out. They kind of miscast, but I'm
Hmm.
I'm going to kind of run with that. I'm going to kind of take my lemons and make lemonade, so to speak. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
excited about that. But I'm like, okay, I need some small things, just kind of trying to be strategic. So yeah, I'm really psyched. I think it's going to be. I don't know what's that saying. It's the best bad idea I've had recently. So
Oh,
I
I've
think it's.
never heard that before.
Yeah.
That
Well, it's I have to laugh at myself a little bit, but yeah, I'm excited. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be great.
I will stay tuned. That might be the title of this episode. The best bad idea I've had in a long or something like that.
Yeah.
That's funny. I've never heard that, but I'm gonna definitely
Yeah.
steal it. Um,
I think it's from a movie, but I can't remember. But yeah, it's I bet if I often think about that myself where it's like, yeah, it's my best bad idea.
I
So
mean, I think that there's something about that casualness that you're going in, because I'm asking all these questions because
Hmm.
I think about things like very intensely when it comes to mold making. I just asked
Hmm.
you, how are you going to do? You're probably like, geez, I haven't thought about it yet. So, thank you. So thank you for humoring me with all those
Oh yeah, for
answers.
sure.
But I'm just kind of getting to this point in my career or body of work or something where I'm tired of being so serious. And it's not like
Hmm.
anybody told me, like, girl, don't be this serious. I just am tired of over analyzing and thinking like, but what do I want to make in iron? Because going to the Western, I saw pieces in the shows. It's amazing what we do in this community with our exhibitions. We put them up.
Hmm.
They're amazing exhibitions and they're up for like 24 hours. Like they're up for a day. It's kind of insane.
Yeah.
But I saw some artwork that, or just saw people casting things that they're like, yeah, I just saw it and I cast it and then I figured out what I was going to do with it. And I have this idea because so I'm going to this Carbondale iron pour that I just go to like the dollar store. Just go to the dollar store because
Hmm.
now a lot of what I do for my iron casting practice is also like tied into videography and like the story of
Okay.
the,
Yeah. Yeah.
documenting either the event or documenting my story of that pour or like what I was casting or whatever. And so yeah, usually it's like I'm making this composition, this piece, but it's like maybe I should, just go to the dollar store or like the toy section at the Goodwill and just find something that
Hmm.
I feel like this calls to me, that it's plastic,
Yeah.
but it needs to be iron. And
Yeah.
so that's
Sure. Yeah.
because also I have very small amount of time to make the
Yeah.
molds for the Carbondale pour. And so that's what I'm thinking about doing is just going, grabbing something that's not very expensive, and then making a mold of it and relaxing a little bit into my iron casting practice
I think that's great.
because I
I
don't
love it.
have a lot of time, because I have like the day job and like this podcast
Yeah.
and like,
Oh yeah.
like
I know
cook,
exactly
yeah, cooking dinner,
what you mean.
So I think that that's like uh very interesting that you're kind of along that same vein as like not that the teeth are a toy, but
Hmm.
it's a little bit more
Yeah.
casual.
Yeah.
And also like sometimes
Absolutely.
those themes can be a little bit more approachable too, because it's like,
Yeah.
not as much of a big barrier of entry. It's like it's cast iron hillbilly teeth. Are they called hillbillies out there? Is that
Yeah, well, it's just I always just call them the Billy Bob teeth. I
Billy
mean,
Bob
it's
teeth? Yeah.
yeah, it's I mean I bet if you looked or hillbilly teeth, yeah, I mean it's something that I think I still have it in the pack. I mean, I just bought it because I thought it was
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. So is that regional to Appalachia? Cause
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's something, it's like with Appalachian stereotypes. So it's like
Mhm.
it's kind of that's something that, it's like I've been kind of fascinated in some of those things. I mean, I just did a series of school desks recent. I have kind of an ongoing series called New Appalachian Spring, and it's like some of it's all kind of like different like headline, not even headlines, like just different like they're basically a school desk and
Mhm.
a 3D printed. I changed, the 3D printed text. So like I did one recently that it was, they're all like based on Appalachia, like my dreams have running water. Which they're also kind of based on my own like personal narrative of like funny things people say to me. I'm one of those people that when you say something funny, I'll probably write it down. Or like I kept thinking about, the other one I did, our main exports are potholes and humble brags. Because I kept thinking about like, now, and granted, of course, Appalachia, coal is still there's all these history of extractive, coal and natural gas. But then I was like, well, what if your, the thing you exported was like a pothole? Because,
Yeah.
the roads, the infrastructure needs help. So they're kind of, even some of it too, like, during the former president's reign, I did one
Mhm.
that was called "Tired of All the Winning." So because that was something that he would bloviate about, that we would all get tired of all the winning, and we certainly got tired, but not just because of all the winning.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, I guess my point is that there's so many, like, I love that idea of text and language being kind of a part of it. And then the school desk is kind of a nice foil, like it can be part of a mixed media, thing. So yeah, I like the kind of like thinking about like trying to make art related to where I'm living. As much as it can be about anything, I do sometimes think about, have got like lately thought a lot about Appalachia and, what it means. I mean, I've been here like 14 years. So to be a resident of this place is like something pretty profound and resonant, in my life.
Which is interesting because you come from the area around, or well, let me try and call back to the beginning of the interview. So where you grew up in Illinois, but where in Illinois?
Kind of around Champaign-Urbana, so kind of like
Okay.
corn country, right in like the super flat, super central
Okay,
part of the state.
So that's how many hours south of Chicago?
3 hours.
3 hours south of Chicago. How many hours north of the St. Louis area? And I know it would
About 3 hours.
so
Yeah,
you're like
about
right in the middle.
kind of like right, dead in the middle, eastern middle portion of the state. Yeah.
Is Illinois considered the Midwest?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
the Illinois, even it's funny, when I lived in Ohio, I never really thought about Ohio as the Midwest, but it is the Midwest. But of course, for me living in Northeast Ohio, it felt a lot more like Pittsburgh, a lot more kind of like industrial. I guess it's all relative, right? But yeah, it's yeah, I mean but yeah, Illinois is definitely pretty solidly Midwestern. So it's crazy to be part of another. Now when I go back to Illinois, I'm like, wow, how did I live here for so many years? It's so flat. There's corn in every direction. It's
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, but it's also awesome too.
Oh yeah. Well, so that was like
but
that was another thing I was going to bring up about well, so let me just finish the thought that I was kind of on that train about was so I'm originally from New England, and then now I live in the St. Louis area, and yeah, I feel that same kind of transplant pride in that I'm from somewhere else, but I love it here, and I'm really like I relish in the culture and the people and the like dive bars on every corner in the in the blue collar town that I live in,
oh yeah,
and I still love like New England, but there's something about the way you're talking about Appalachia, did I say it right? Appalachia, the way that you're talking about and thinking about it, I feel that same way about the Midwest and where I'm living now. So I really relate to, and there's something about being kind of like a transplant or an outsider that, because my husband is from the St. Louis area, grew up west of the St. Louis city. And so, but in an equally as like kind of blue collar, home of the GM plant, we work at the factory, kind of upbringing. And so I feel like, I shouldn't say like he doesn't see it in the same light that I do.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. Another thing, so when you're talking about going to Arizona, so I just bought plane tickets to go to the Iron Tribe conference down in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Have you heard about that one?
I've heard about it. Yeah.
With David Lobdell. So I kind of made a promise that I would go. And so I'm going. It's set in stone now.
Great.
But how do I bring molds there? And so I've been kind of toying with the idea of like, should I make a mold and ship it? Should I ship it with the pattern? As kind of just like an experiment. Do I make a mold and then bring it on my carry-on I mean, I have
Yeah.
Southwest. I get 2 bags,
Right.
check 2 bags. I can't say it's free. It's included in the price. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say. But
Yeah.
like, you know, how, will the mold, do you leave the pattern in? Do you leave so it's like,
Oh yeah.
these are all things that
No,
like,
man, I know it's like some real big, crazy, like, kind of huge things to think about. Gosh, I mean, it reminds me of like getting work over to Berlin, for the
yeah,
the ninth international, and getting things there and back, and like it's a lot. It's a lot, big. I mean, they're awesome questions. They're tricky and awesome, and even I think about like dung molds, things
yeah.
people make on site, like, but but I like your ideas of like, how do you be pragmatic with what you mail out there or what you take with you?
Yeah. Cause I mean, if I'm doing it, and now I will say like my artistic practice has kind of shifted
Yeah.
because of the kind of videography work that I'm doing and yes, I am making art to express myself artistically and work out some of my angst or my,
Yeah.
issues or things that I feel like I have something that I need to say, but I also,
Yeah.
like I was talking about, go to the dollar store and get something from the dollar store, ram it up and
Yeah.
see what happens. It's like, well, what if the like, it's not so much about the end product. What if it's more about how is this story told? Like, how does it work? Like,
Right.
how do I box up a mold? How do I even ship it? Do I make the mold fit into like, if it fits, it ships one of those like USPS boxes, saying goodbye to it at the post office and then getting it. What does the box look like after it's been shipped? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so these are
Yeah, I
things that
do.
like I've been thinking about that are interesting to me, like how would it go forward? So
Yeah.
anyway, so it just so happened that you were talking about going to Arizona, and I was like, what are you doing for your molds? Well, I feel like we are at the point right now where we usually talk about hot on the horizon. You got anything hotter?
No,
I mean, because
I feel like, yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add is I'm building a portable metal casting furnace. So that's probably something hot on the horizon. I'm, in addition to all the other cool outdoor sculptures and different things I'll be building and working on, I'm building a portable furnace, and kind of the idea is to be able to use it for public and community-based art projects. So that's something I'm pretty psyched about. I got some money from my university for that, so that's something I'm working on, probably more in the spring, and getting ready for SLOS for
yeah.
the National Cast Iron Conference. So I'll certainly be putting together some artwork when the exhibits come out, and hopefully participate and probably put together some panels.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so those are probably the big things. It's the fall is always such a busy season for me. This fall has been extraordinarily just kind of packed to the gills. So I'm kind of looking for, hopefully, fingers crossed, that the spring will be a little less busy and more time to make art and just kind of get caught up. So we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I actually thought about asking you before, but then I forgot about it until right now. But can you tell me a little bit about your program? Like because it sounds like you have a graduate program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
do.
so like if somebody was listening to this, I actually have to tell you, I don't know if people who don't cast iron listen to this. So I don't
Yeah.
know. But if there was somebody who was listening and they're interested in going to school for iron, I guess it would be more like if they were undergraduate students looking for a graduate program that they might be able
Mm-hmm.
to concentrate in iron or something. Is that something they could, do at your program?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for us, like our program is small, but really very dynamic. So, and the reality is we're doing, iron pours at regional places. So, casting in Pittsburgh, casting in other regional places around Appalachia and, the New England and beyond. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I think for somebody who's interested in iron, our program would be great. Also, just for somebody who's interested in getting a good grounding in a lot of different materials. So we have a pretty dynamic public art on campus project program. So we're really, kind of getting ready to reboot that next year and think about kind of what the next version is. So getting, students even more engaged with that. So I think there's a lot of great things. And also we're so close to so many things. We're so relatively close to DC and Pittsburgh, among many, many others. So Baltimore. So yeah, we're kind of in a shockingly good location, in Morgantown, West Virginia. So yeah, people should definitely come check it out if they have interest in a good MFA program.
Well, so we're at the part of the interview where you tell us some advice.
Wow, advice for young people, old people, lovers of iron, current and lovers of iron to be. So
Yeah.
I guess the thing I would say is that keep your eyes open to all of the great people you're going to meet and the experiences that you're going to have by being part of this community. I mean, I think that that's something that's really been resonant with me about how it's just so exciting to think about the people you meet who are new friends who become old friends. It certainly sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Thinking about just kind of remaining open, and kind of much like sometimes people help you and you didn't know you needed help. That's to me a good metaphor for life. So I feel like there's a lot of, the things I would say is there's so many good metaphors for art and life kind of wrapped together in this endeavor of iron casting. So, that's probably the biggest thing I would say is kind of a, teachable moment for the future is like, and I guess the other teachable moment I would have is my colleague and friend Jason Lee when he said, "Don't quit because everybody else will." So that's a pretty good one too.
And we're definitely not a community of quitters. I mean, that's one
Certainly not.
thing.
Far from it.
There's people that you just see it at every single pour. Well, not every single pour, because nobody can go to every single pour, but it's like these people are just, reoccurring in my life. And it's like, we're definitely not a community of quitters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, so are you ready to go on over to the after show?
After show sounds great.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Sounds great to me. Do you have any ideas of kind of like what we want to talk about so we can tease for the public audience? So I have some kind of like, usually it works best if we have like a story or a topic that we want to talk about. But some of the prompts that I've used is your favorite place to pour iron or a favorite iron pour memory or the worst thing that you've ever seen at an iron pour. But some people don't like focusing on the bad things. So they'll talk about the best iron pour that they ever had or a funny story related to iron casting. Are any of these kind of like marinating, anything kind of bubbling to the surface?
It's interesting. I mean, I definitely can like connect with all of them in some ways. I mean, I agree, probably something more on the positive side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think. Yeah, I could probably I think I have some really good yeah, I might actually talk about Scranton, Pennsylvania and the eighth international. I could talk about that because that was probably one of my favorite experiences.
Well, that sounds fabulous because I also unfortunately wasn't able to go to that international, even though it was so close to home.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go on over to the after show and talk about Scranton, Pennsylvania.
That sounds great. Let's do it.
So for the public audience, though, we're going to say goodbye. So Dylan, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
Oh, Laura, it's been great. Thanks a lot for having me. This has been an absolute treat, and it's wonderful to connect with you.
Yeah, it's been really great to get to know you better, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person again. But also, I'm looking forward to going over to the after show and talking about Scranton, Pennsylvania. So
let's do it.
So everybody that's listening and watching, thanks so much for tuning in. Apply to SLOS calls and find an iron pour in your area and go. And We'll see you in the next one. Okay. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Dylan's energetic personality and optimistic outlook on life makes him a positive role model for so many of us. His willingness to playfully experiment and his tendency to embark on new adventures of learning demonstrates that it's never too late to dive into anything you're interested in. He continues to push the boundaries of sculptural iron casting, and he adds new community members to our numbers as each semester flies by. Dylan, thank you for all of the work that you do. And that's not only including your artistic body of work, but I'm also referring to the work that you do with students as you introduce them to sculptural materials and iron. I hope that you have a great time on your upcoming trip to Arizona, and I wish you the best with each and every endeavor that you take on. I'm staying tuned, and I can't wait to see how it all turns out. If you're interested in seeing Dylan's portfolio, you can visit his website at dylancollinsart.com, and that's spelled dylancollinsart.com. And I really recommend that you follow him on Instagram at Dylan_Ethan_Collins. And for one last word of thanks to our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, for supporting the show and helping me to capture these snapshots of our community members as they recount their iron art origin stories. As far as the national conference is concerned, and you already know that Sloss Metal Arts hosts the national conference in Birmingham every 2 years, it's go time now. So go to the NCCC IAP website, check out what's happening, and apply to a call so that your genius can be showcased. The conference will be this upcoming April 5th through the 9th in 2023, and I can't wait to see you there. So yes, thanks again to Sloss Metal Arts for supporting the podcast, as well as our other supporters on Patreon. The funds that you support me with are invaluable to help me continue to produce these episodes. So if you would like access to the after shows for as little as $1 a month, go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron. And there you can choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. But supporters at any level get access to the after show from each episode. And by now you already know it's an extra 15 to 20 minutes with the show's guest where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more story. But if you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast Iron on Patreon, that's okay. Please instead share the podcast with someone that you think would be interested in listening or watching, and I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And one more thing I want to mention is, folks, it's fall iron pour season. Go out and get to a pour. There's events happening all over, and personally I'll be attending an iron pour hosted by Southern Illinois University Carbondale on November 5th, as well as one hosted by Black Dog Metal Arts in Peoria, Illinois. And that one in Peoria is going to be on November 19th. So you can get more information about either of these events through their Instagram handles. So it's SIU Sculpture for Carbondale and Black Dog Metal Arts for the Peoria pour. And honestly, Facebook and Instagram are alight with announcements of upcoming pours. So like I already said, find one in your area and go. You won't regret it. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.